If you search Beijing Hutong online, this is probably what you'll see. Carefully restored gray walls, cafés and craft shops moving into old courtyards, tourists queuing to take photos. Most of these places are in the north of the city, near the Forbidden City and Shechahai, the face Beijing is willing to show the world. But walk south through Tianmen for just a few kilometers, and you enter a completely different Beijing. No signs, no influencer shops, no crowds waiting to check in. Clotheslines overhead, bicycles against weathered gates, an old neighbor carrying groceries from deep inside the alley. This is Beijing's South City. Same metropolis, another century, another way of life. This episode isn't simply about a hidden corner tourists miss. Through the sharp contrast between south and north, how commercialized the streets are, who lives there, what the living environment looks like. I want to explain how Beijing grew into what it is today, and what happened to the people who live in the city during the city's most spectacular expansion. To understand today's north-south gap, you first need the layout of Old Beijing, roughly the area inside Second Ring Road today. In the Ming and Qing dynasties, the Forbidden City sat at the center, ringed by city walls. Inside the walls was the inner city, that is North City. South of the Tianmen gates, Zhangyang, Chongwen, Xianwu, lay the outer city, what we now call the South City. In 1648, shortly after the Manchu conquest, the Shunji Emperor issued a harsh decree. All Han Chinese and merchants in the inner city had to move to the outer city to make room for the Eight Banners armies and their families. From that day, Beijing was cut in two by administrative order. North is power and military space, south is Han and marketplace space. This wasn't natural inequality. It was a line drawn by the state. The inner city during the Qing dynasty, it was banner and princely territory first. For a long time, Han Chinese were not encouraged to open shops or theaters here. That was the opposite of the streets in the south. By the late Qing, stipends could not keep up with prices. Many banner families had to rent out or sell their properties. Aristocratic land in the north had been slipping for decades. In the Republican period, 1912–1949, the clearest change in the north was old mansion land taken over by new institutions. The best example is at Dongdan today, Peking Union Medical College Hospital. The large medical campus was once the mansion of the Prince Yu, a major Qing princely estate. After the empire fell, such estates could no longer be maintained, and the land entered the market. Around 1916, the Rockefeller Foundation purchased the site. The old mansion was demolished. A pair of stone lions remained at the gate. In 1921, the medical college opened. Palace-like outlines on the outside, Western medicine inside. A prince's house became one of China's best-known hospitals. Around the same time, Wang Fujing gained large modern shops and imported goods. By the Republican era, the North was home not only to tighter banner households, but also civil servants, foreign firm staff, doctors, and professors. Now the South. From the Qing through the Republic, the outer city did three things: trade, performance, and daily survival. Deschiller near Qianmen was the busiest commercial street in the outer city, packed with time-honored brands and theaters. Tianqiao grew from a Qing fairground into a square for street performers. Acrobatics, storytelling, and Xiangxing comedy lived here. It was popular theater on the pavement, not in a palace. Around Zuanwomen, hundreds of provincial guild halls hosted people arriving from other provinces. The 8 great hutongs were dense with tea houses and entertainment, a different rhythm from the walled mansions of the north. The residents were merch, craftsmen, and shopkeepers. This was not aristocratic Beijing near the palace. It was working Beijing. If you walk into a hutong today, the courtyard house in front of you is often no longer one family behind one gate. Many households share the same yard, with sheds and adons filling every passage. If you want to know how many families live in a yard like this, just count the electricity meters. Each household has its own meter and pays its own bill. Beijingers call such places dazayuan. Yet down to 1949, what we have been describing is still mansions, shops, and guild halls. Why did it turn into what you see now? To explain that, you have to start from when Beijing became the capital again. In 1949, Beijing became the nation's capital again. The machinery of the state had to land in this city. Ministries, schools, and factories moved in. Cadres and workers were transferred from other provinces. The population surged, but housing was still largely in the old Yuan courtyards. Yards that once held one family began to hold many. The urban population of Beijing increased from 2 million in the 1940s to 4 million, and reached 7 million by the 1960s. The government soon had to draw a new blueprint for the capital. At least 2 paths were debated. One favored building a new city west of the old walls, shifting administration and housing outward and giving the historic core room to breathe. The other, closer to the Soviet model, kept production, offices, and housing tightly packed inside the urban area, including industry and government functions within the old city. The latter was chosen. The old city was not emptied out. People kept concentrating inside the walls. Many courtyards were taken over by work units and split among employees and their families. A dozen households in one gate became normal. Beijing's population kept climbing. By the 1964 census, it was over 7 million, much of that from administrative expansion and inward migration, not birth rates alone. Then came the 10 years of the Cultural Revolution. Another shock was added. The city walls and gate towers that had stood for centuries were torn down. Many original homeowners lost their property rights. Houses were seized or could no longer be held. More ordinary residents were placed into whatever courtyards remained. Yards that were already crowded took in still more families. In 1976, the Tangshan earthquake terrified the city. People built earthquake shelters in their courtyards. They slept in open yards at first. Then the sheds became brick rooms, kitchens, and tiny bedrooms, taking over tree patches and passages. Temporary structures were never removed. They piled on top of earlier adons. Much of the clutter you see in Hutongs today grew layer by layer this way. Beijingers call such yards dazayuan. A dazayuan was not built in a day. It was stacked up after the capital returned, after the Soviet influence plan was chosen, and after political campaigns and the earthquake each added another floor of crowding. The story of the dazayuan did not stop once the courtyards were packed full. After reform and opening up, Beijing accelerated. Towers, malls, home prices, and daily costs all climbed. Hutongs in tourist photos were polished into scenic streets. Yet many people inside the dazayuan lived on a slower clock. A large share are retirees from state factories or government work units. In their working years, they earned on a national standard wage, a world away from today's rents and property prices. The city grew rich and pensions did rise, but often not as fast as the cost of living. Their main asset was often just the room in the alley, which did not soar with the housing market. Being Beijingese did not mean sharing in the boom. A whole generation found the life they knew left behind by the city's prosperity. Around the 2000s and the following decade, the old city went through a wave of demolition and redevelopment. Many southern courtyards sat for years in a state of waiting to be torn down. What is shabby today may be gone tomorrow. Researchers have described a paradox. Moving into a modern apartment can improve housing conditions while breaking neighbor ties and leaving people hollow. Some sum it up as better housing, harder life. That does not fit everyone, but it shows relocation is never only about square meters. Relocation programs, often called tung tue in Chinese, offer money and policy support to leave the hutong for housing blocks farther out. Some accept, take compensation, and leave leaking sheds behind. Others refuse, unwilling to lose old neighbors or a morning sunbathing in the shared yard. There is no single right choice, only each household's calculation. Walk in the southern Hutongs today and you still see elderly neighbors carrying groceries, chatting at the door. Promotional images of Beijing usually show the restored lantern streets of the north. The people who still live here and the tourists who come to photograph them share one city but not one postcard. Beijing is still being rewritten. Who stays, who leaves, and who gets seen in the story is not finished yet.